We were engaged for 5 years, and then he said he had never loved me. I thought he just didn't know how to love anyone. Turns out he just didn't love me. Later, he experienced everything I had suffered and begged me not to leave. But I had made up my mind. I left without even looking back. When Chongjo came back with Lan Qing, I was massaging Madame Shen's shoulders. He stood in front of me, took Lan Qing's hand, and said, "Let's call off the engagement. I want to marry Lan." Lan Qing hid behind him, glancing around the room smugly, and finally fixed her gaze on me, her expression full of pride. Before I could even process the shock, Madame Shen's face lit up with joy. "My son, you've finally come to your senses." She happily held Lan Qing's hand, fussing over her, and then turned to me with annoyance. "You're not even married to my son. Now that he's found someone he truly connects with, just do as he says and cancel the wedding." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mother-in-law." "Shut your mouth," she snapped. "Who are you calling mother-in-law? Tomorrow, I'll dissolve this engagement. From now on, the Shun and Shang families will have nothing to do with each other." I looked to Chongjo, but he only gave me a cold glance. Seeing me still standing there, Madame Shen said irritably, "Why are you still here? Go tidy up the guest room for Lan Qing. Honestly, you have no sense at all." I bit my lower lip, fists clenched under my sleeves. "You want me to prepare a room for her? If not you, then who? You're the reason my son's been staying out every night, unwilling to come home. Now that he finally has someone he truly cares about, shouldn't you treat her well?" "Of course. She's the one your son truly cares about. I'm nothing." As I walked away, I vaguely heard someone behind me say, "She's always sulking like someone owes her the world." Back in my room, I sat on the floor, swallowing back the sobs rising in my throat. He'd finally broken off the engagement. What was meant to come had come at last. That night, I didn't go to dinner. I didn't want to see them all laughing and enjoying themselves, especially not when I was the one who was supposed to be his fiancée. The night wind was cool. I stood by the window in a daze. Then, the door creaked open behind me. Chongjo stood quietly at the entrance. "There's no rush," he said softly. "I'll speak to your father, your uncle, and explain everything before we formally break off the engagement." I kept my back to him and said nothing. He let out a low sigh. I was wrong in this matter. "I'll make it up to you." I dug my nails into my palms, the pain making them numb. I didn't know when he left. I tried to move my stiff legs and suddenly collapsed to my knees. We were betrothed as children. Later, Chongjo became a court official, and Madame Shen began to resent me more and more. She had always been trying to get him to break off the engagement. Although we hadn't officially married, I already saw myself as part of the Shen family. All these years, I had done everything I could to manage their household. When Madame Shen fell ill, I ignored my family's objections and insisted on moving in to take care of her myself. I thought, sooner or later, I'd become part of this family. This was all my responsibility. I knew my family background was humble, and I never took her harsh treatment to heart. I believed that one day, she would come to accept me. Now that Chongjo had brought up breaking off the engagement, Madame Shen couldn't wait to cut ties. She acted as if I were some curse that had brought chaos to their home. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Strangely enough, my body felt lighter, even relaxed. I was about to call for Mummy in to help me wash up when the door suddenly burst open, and I ran in by myself. That's right, I ran in. She trembled as she handed me a mirror. I took it, looked, and was so shocked I couldn't speak. The face in the mirror was Chongjo's. We had switched bodies. Now I was him, and he was me. "What's going on?" We spoke in unison, then both covered our mouths at the same time. Hearing the noise, Chongjo's personal bodyguard rushed in. He asked what was wrong. Chongjo waved him off. "Leave. Unless I call for you, don't come in again." The guard looked at him, then at me. To his eyes, I was now Chongjo. I cleared my throat and said, "You may go." He obeyed, but he still looked confused. Mummy came rushing in, heading straight for Chongjo. "Young miss, You ran out without even wearing shoes. What if you catch a chill? Shun Yunjo backed away in fear. Mamian didn't notice anything strange. He steadied himself and said, "Today, ahem, I'll handle it myself. You may leave." It was the strangest thing, hearing your own voice from someone else. Once Mamian left, the room fell completely silent. It took us quite a while to come to terms with being in each other's bodies. Shin Yunjo instinctively slapped a wooden pillar with his palm and immediately grimaced in pain. Why does that hurt so much? I winced too. That was my body after all. In the end, we agreed to keep this a secret from everyone for now and focus on finding a way to switch back. I asked softly, "Yesterday, didn't you say you wanted to break off the engagement?" He awkwardly rolled his neck. "Let's put that on hold. We can't exactly break off an engagement looking like this. And you talk normally. Don't pitch your voice like that." I wasn't pitching my voice at all. If anything, you're the one sounding too gruff, ruining the gentle image of a virtuous wife I worked so hard to build. At the dining table, Madame Shin beamed as she picked food for me, now mistaking me for Shin Yunjo, making it so awkward that I didn't know how to even pick up my chopsticks. Shin Yunjo hadn't yet adjusted to our body swap and extended his bowl toward her. Madame Shin furrowed her brows. "Getting bold, are you? Expecting me to serve you? Get up and wait on me." Seeing that he froze, she twisted his arm hard enough to turn his face pale from pain. I struggled to keep the corners of my mouth from curling up, enjoying each bite of meat and vegetables with satisfaction. I'd never been treated like this before. Back then, to maintain a good image, I wouldn't even reach for the same dish a third time. It was suffocating. Shin Yunjo, face contorted, served dishes to Madame Shin, and when it came to me, he reluctantly dumped food into my bowl, only to be immediately scolded and forbidden to eat. Shin Yunjo stared at her in disbelief. "Mother? Who are you calling mother? Watch your tongue." Lan Qing, who had been quietly sitting nearby, suddenly dropped to her knees beside him with a delicate sob, pretending to plead on his behalf, though really, she was begging for mercy for the body I was currently in. Tears streamed down her face as she whimpered, stealing Shin Yunjo's soul right out of him. Just as he reached out to hug her, Lan Qing let out a dramatic scream and collapsed on the floor, weeping uncontrollably. "Why did young madam push me? I know she doesn't like me, but I really do care about her. Please don't be angry at me." She then turned to look at me, wiping away tears. "Shen Lang, maybe I should just leave." Shin Yunjo stood frozen with his hand in midair, totally speechless for once. I barely held in my laughter, cleared my throat, and stepped in to calm both his sweetheart and Madame Shin. Madame Shin sighed. "You're always so soft-hearted, letting others take advantage. I told you long ago to call off this engagement." As she spoke, she jabbed her finger into Shin Yunjo's forehead, leaving a few bright red marks. Then she ordered him to return to his room and not come out again. On the way back to the room, Lan Qing was waiting. The moment she saw me, she threw herself weakly into my arms, sobbing that Shin Yunjo had disrespected her. With that graceful figure and sweet voice, so this is the type he likes. Compared to me, so dull, can't sing, can't flirt, it's no wonder he found me tiresome. Back in the room, Shin Yunjo grabbed me by the collar. "Switch back. Now." I found it funny. I'd endured this kind of life for 5 long years since marrying into this family. He couldn't even last a single day. He let go of my collar, clearly frustrated. It must be her past behavior that upset my mother. That's why she's taking it out on me. I felt utterly drained. So this is how he's always seen me. I didn't want to say more and turned to leave. On the way to court, our carriage suddenly hit something. The driver said it was a carriage from the Shang family. I lifted the curtain and saw that it belonged to my older brother. I was about to greet him joyfully when I remembered. I was Shin Yunjo now. My brother had never liked Shin Yunjo. He always thought that if Shin Yunjo had treated me better, my life in the Shin family wouldn't be so hard. "I heard you brought a woman back to the house." I didn't know what to say, and could only nod. My brother yanked my collar and growled, "What about Aksu, huh?" I stiffly turned my head. She agreed to end the engagement. When?
Soon.
Within the next few days. He shoved me away. It better be. Listen up, Shun. I don't care what you do, but if Axa gets hurt because of you, I'll skin you alive. Our fellow officials came over to mediate before he finally walked away. I reached for my neck, still reeling. In my memory, my brother was always composed and strict. I never knew he had this side to him. Morning court was strangely quiet that day. Rumor had it that a fire had broken out in the imperial harem. And just after that was handled, a flood struck Chongjo. Trouble after trouble. The emperor barely skimmed through the memorials before ending court early. As I walked out of the main hall, adjusting my official robe, someone approached me. It was Tang Yuan. We had grown up together. He was 2 years older than me and always tried to boss me around, which annoyed me to no end. His face looked grim. He stormed up to me like a gust of wind and got straight to the point. You're breaking off the engagement? I turned to glance at my brother, who angrily flicked his sleeves and walked off. These two were clearly in sync. Looked like I wouldn't be escaping peacefully today. Before I could even nod, Tang Yuan grabbed my collar. Shun, what do you take her for? You think you can just cancel it like that? I stiffly turned my head. She'd agreed to it too. Tang Yuan clenched his teeth. If she suffers even a little because of this, I won't let you off. He looked fierce enough to beat me up on the spot if we weren't in the palace. His words were exactly what my brother had just said. These two really were of one mind. Watching them leave, I felt strangely warm, yet oddly sad. When I was younger, I used to hate Tang Yuan. He always tattled on me to my brother. And my brother, cold as ever, would forbid me from doing this or that, and punish me when I disobeyed. If it hadn't been for this body swap, I would never have known how much I meant to them. I looked up at the sky and wondered if heaven was giving me a chance to start over. Passing by a pastry shop, I bought a few pieces of osmanthus cake. It used to be my favorite. But ever since I married into the Shin family, I hadn't had it once. Madame Shun had forbidden it, saying only uncultured people ate that kind of thing. The cake smelled sweet, tasted sweeter, but when I put it in my mouth, it felt like needles stabbing my throat. My nose stung, and I couldn't stop the tears from rising. The carriage driver stared at me in stunned silence. Just as I got back to the estate and hadn't even stepped out of the carriage, someone ran over, urging me to hurry inside. They said Miss Lawn had been pushed into the lake by the young madam and was in critical condition. The young madam had been punished with 10 strokes and was now kneeling in the ancestral hall. My son, get that jinx out of here. Not only did she try to kill someone, she even hit me. Madame Shin bawled as she threw herself into my arms, her forehead wrapped in gauze. I ignored her dramatic wailing and rushed to check on Lan Qing. Right now, she was a key player in our plan to break off the engagement. Until we switched back, nothing could happen to her. Lan Qing buried herself in my chest, silently shedding tears. She avoided the heart of the matter and instead subtly twisted the story, pinning every word of blame on Shen Yunzhou. She said she had only wanted to reconcile with him, but he refused and, out of jealousy, pushed her into the lake trying to drown her. Aside from feeling sorry for my own body, I found it pretty satisfying. With that brain of his, Shen Yunzhou had finally been outplayed by his sweetheart. Serves him right. I gently comforted Lan Qing and then went to the ancestral hall to find Shen Yunzhou. From a distance, I saw him slouched over, kneeling lopsidedly. When he heard someone behind him, he immediately sat up straight. I couldn't help but laugh. He shot me a glare, then turned his head away. Why did you push her? I asked. Isn't she the one you love? Shen Yunzhou's face flushed red. I didn't push her. She. He couldn't finish because the servants had all witnessed it. Lan Qing had framed him, and when Madame Shin tried to scold him, he used too much force and accidentally knocked her over, injuring her forehead. If we hadn't swapped bodies, I would have been the one taking the blame today with no way to clear my name. I asked him, if it had been me today, what would you have done? He pressed his lips tightly together and said nothing, and my heart sank, inch by inch. He knew the truth, yet still chose to side with Lan Qing. I turned to leave. Shen Yunzhou immediately stood up and insisted I kneel with him. No sooner had we knelt than Madame Shin's booming voice echoed in. She cursed him as a bringer of bad luck while sobbing and urging me to end the engagement. Shin Yunjo's face darkened, saying nothing. I looked at him quietly for a moment, then led Madame Shin away. He knelt there the entire night. The next morning, as I sat down for breakfast, he still forced himself to stand and serve us at the table. Eventually, I felt a bit sorry for him and told him to go rest. Lan Qing, who had been sitting to the side with tears shimmering in her eyes, looked like she was about to start crying again. I quickly explained that for now, he was still the young madam, at least on the surface. Things had to look proper. If we broke off the engagement and he ended up injured or maimed, I wouldn't be able to explain it to the Shang family. Only then did she stop crying and sweetly served food into my bowl. After breakfast, I had planned to sort through my personal belongings so I could take them when the engagement was officially broken. But then a servant came in, saying someone was waiting to see me at the gate. Shen Yunzhou suddenly remembered it was his day off, and he'd made plans with the young master from the Minister of Personnel's household to go hear some music. He looked hesitant, clearly torn, and said he wouldn't go. The servant looked back and forth between him and me, waiting for a decision. I stood up. Why not go? Honestly, I wanted to see what kind of life he usually lived. The minister's surname was Wu. He had only one precious son, who was spoiled rotten. He and Shin Yunzhou had been classmates back in school and had become close friends. The moment I stepped outside, he pulled me into a big hug. Shin Yunzhou, flustered, quickly shoved him off. Wu looked at him strangely. What's up with you today? Since when do you boss us around? Then he slung an arm around my shoulder and dragged me into the carriage. Behind us, I could hear Shin Yunzhou shouting in panic and Madame Shen scolding. Wu patted my shoulder sympathetically. You've had it rough, bro. The place we went to was called Nanhuaguan. The courtesans there were breathtakingly beautiful, their eyes enchanting, and just one soft touch of their fingers had Wu completely hooked. We were led into a private room, and soon a few women carrying lutes came in, gave a light bow, and began to perform. Their voices were sweet and gentle, the melody captivating. The music lingered even after the song ended. No wonder Shin Yunzhou rarely stayed home. These girls really knew how to win a man's heart. I closed my eyes and listened when a faint fragrance reached my nose. Suddenly, a cup of wine was brought to my lips by one of the girls. Startled, I quickly pushed it away, and everyone turned to look at me. Wu scratched his head and sat up. Seriously? You've really been tamed by your wife. You were never like this before. I steadied my nerves and said, I'm just a bit tired today. Let's meet another time. Without waiting for his reply, I stood up and left. Shin Yunzhou, what else have you been hiding from me? If you truly didn't want me, why wait 5 years? You could have just told me. I would have let go. Why spend every day drinking and drifting around outside? The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't suppress my desire to break off the engagement. All I wanted now was to return home and get everything in order. A gust of wind hit me hard. My vision blurred, pain shot through my nose, and I fell heavily to the ground. Before I could react, Tang Yuan was on top of me, raining punches down with his fists like a storm. As he hit me, he shouted, "Shameless bastard. So, this is why you're breaking off the engagement? You come to a place like this? I'll beat you to death." No one dared stop him. I endured the beating until he was finally spent and climbed off me. From his eyes, it was clear. He truly hated Shin Yunzhou. Honestly, I was scared he really might skin me alive. I quickly explained that today was just a planned outing, and I hadn't done anything improper. Hearing the commotion, Wu came out and helped explain. Only then did Tang Yuan believe it. He spewed a few more threats, glared at me, and stormed off. Wu patted my shoulder again. Bro, you really need to keep an eye on your wife. That love rival of yours? He's no joke. I shoved him away. What nonsense are you spouting? I'm not making this up. My instincts are spot on. He's been in love with your wife for ages. You just cut in halfway, and now he's out for blood. If I'm lying, I'll chop off my own head and use it as your wine cup. I was stunned. Thinking back on how Tang Yuan and I used to interact as kids, I never noticed any affection. But Wu Yi sounded so convinced. I wasn't so sure anymore. 2 days later, Chongjo was supposed to escort me back to my family. Originally, I had planned to bring up the engagement during this visit, but after everything that happened, I had to put it off. Madame Shun was in an unusually good mood and told us to return early. I looked at Chongjo. He was like a lifeless puppet, indifferent to all her insults. We traveled in silence. He fiddled with his fingers, then suddenly said, "I take back what I said before. We don't have to break off the engagement." I smiled and asked, "Why?" He glanced up at me, then quickly looked down again. We were promised as children. Grandfather personally arranged it. We shouldn't go against that." I leaned back and let out a soft laugh. "You already brought another woman into the house. Now you care about who made the arrangement. Shang Shirshu, you're always like this, always contradicting me. Can't you just go along for once? Miss Lanqing always agrees with you. Once we break off the engagement, you can marry her." He choked on his words and turned away, refusing to look at me. In the end, that meal passed without me ever bringing up the matter of breaking off the engagement. My brother kept glaring at me, and I kept my head down, pretending not to notice. My parents were overjoyed, holding Shinyunjo's hand and talking to him endlessly. I didn't get the chance to hear any of it, because my brother dragged me away. He grabbed me by the neck and demanded to know why I hadn't brought up the separation. I had no answer. Thankfully, Shinyunjo arrived just in time and pulled me free. My brother's face immediately changed. Since I was home, he wanted me to spend more time with our parents. Then he turned and left. Shinyunjo stared at me for a long while, then quietly said, "Let's go home." I asked him what my parents had said to him, but he didn't reply. He just silently made his way back to the house. The flooding in Chongjo had gotten out of control. I was ordered to go handle the disaster relief, and Tang Yuan was assigned to go with me. That night, Shinyunjo kept pacing back and forth in front of me. I put down the half-packed bundle and asked, "What exactly do you want?" He opened his mouth a few times before finally saying in a low voice, "You're going on this trip with that guy from the Tang family, you and him." I scoffed. "Don't assume everyone's as filthy-minded as you. There's nothing between me and him. It's always been clean." He knew he was in the wrong and had nothing to say in return. With a huff, he stormed off. On the day of departure, Madame Shin didn't come to see me off. She said some relative of hers had run into trouble and would be staying at the manor for a while. That relative was heavily pregnant, clearly close to giving birth. She was busy getting ready to host. I sat in the carriage, looking across the courtyard at Shinyunjo. Once upon a time, I had stood there just like that, watching him leave, until he disappeared from view. He handed me a packet wrapped in oil paper. Inside were pieces of osmanthus cake. He said he'd gotten up early to buy it, and it was still warm, told me to eat it while it was hot. I gave a quiet and lowered the curtain, cutting us off completely. The flood in Chongjo was far worse than we imagined. The dikes and field ridges were all damaged, but worse, there were already signs of a plague breaking out inside the city. Tang Yuan and I split responsibilities. He handled the floodwaters while I managed food and shelter for the displaced. We had brought along an imperial physician who managed to contain the outbreak for the time being. But containment wasn't a permanent solution. We needed to eradicate the source. We decided to cremate the bodies and separate the people into smaller groups to reduce contact and limit the spread of disease. But the moment we started the cremations, things nearly spiraled out of control. The villagers refused to let us move the bodies. They insisted on taking them home for burial. No matter how much we explained, it was useless. Shoving turned into fighting, and before we knew it, chaos broke out. The riot caught me completely off guard. We had to retreat back to the courier station while the crowd outside screamed and shouted. I braced myself against the door and shouted, "Someone go get Tang Yuan." Moments later, the noise outside suddenly quieted. I peeked out and saw Tang Yuan on top of the ringleader, punching him mercilessly before dragging him off to jail. Then he stormed up and gave me a shove. "You act like a damn girl." Disgusting. I instinctively clutched at my chest, shaken. Thanks. Really? He stared at my hand, stunned. I quickly smoothed my clothes and led the soldiers away. This time, Tang Yuan personally oversaw the cremations. No one dared utter another word. The thick grayish smoke covered the sky. I pinched my nose and rubbed at it, uncomfortable. Then I rubbed my temples to ease the itching in my nose. When I turned around, Tang Yuan was standing behind me, staring. I froze. What is it? He kept his eyes locked on my hand. Your nose bothering you too? It's something I've had since I was a kid. As soon as I said it, I caught myself and quickly corrected. I mean, it's just the smell. Makes me uncomfortable. Anything else you need? His dark eyes were deep and unreadable. Nervously, I gripped the front of my robe again. After a pause, he said, "And no, nothing. I've got this. You should rest." As he turned to leave, I stared at his back, doubting my ears. Was his voice gentle just now? Did I hear that right? After the cremations, we moved the survivors into separate groups and began building large tents for temporary shelter. We needed a lot of wood for the shelters, most of which Tang Yuan brought back himself. He handed over his own responsibilities to the local magistrate and took over mine instead. Every time I tried to pitch in, he would suddenly show up and stop me, rushing to do it himself. I pressed a hand on his shoulder. You got nothing better to do lately? He glanced at me, then immediately looked away. Can't you see I'm busy? Go sit over there. Go help with the porridge. This is man's work. Excuse me? Aren't I a man right now? The medicine we used to treat the plague still wasn't working. I'd lost count of how many times it had failed. The number of infected people kept rising. Rumors spread across the city like wildfire that this illness had no cure, that everyone was doomed to die. Fear had completely engulfed Chongjo. Make medicine. Take medicine. Useless. Death. Then start over again. Finally, the death of a mother and her child broke the people's last shred of hope. Another riot broke out. This time it was even worse. The gates of the courier station were knocked down with ease. They spotted me immediately and charged at me with weapons raised. Tang Yuan shoved me into a room and stood alone against the angry crowd. He said the people needed someone to vent their rage on, so he didn't fight back. I shouted to be let out, but the people with me pinned me down. I heard sobbing, though I couldn't tell whose it was. Tang Yuan's silhouette was pressed against the door. I watched his shadow slowly bend over, folding nearly in half, until it finally collapsed to the ground. Only then did the monstrous figures surrounding him begin to disperse. The riot was eventually suppressed by the local authorities, but over 100 people, soldiers and civilians alike, had died, and the wounded numbered in the thousands. When the chaos finally died down, I flung open the door and rushed to catch Tang Yuan. He was covered in blood, staining the ground around him a deep crimson. With Tang Yuan severely wounded, panic spread through the city. A soldier knelt in front of me, begging to be sent home. He claimed the illness was incurable and that if they didn't leave now, everyone would die. His words incited the others, and soon the room was filled with soldiers on their knees. I drew my sword and cut off his head myself, telling everyone, "This is the fate of deserters." After they'd all cleared out, I sank to the ground, my face still splattered with warm blood. It was the first time I'd ever held a sword, and it taught me that I couldn't fall, not now. The people of this city needed me. Tang Yuan needed me. I worked day and night, trying to solve both the flooding and the plague. We dug trenches and repaired canals. If it could be blocked, we blocked it. If not, we diverted the water into temporary ponds. Then we rebuilt the field ridges. The shelters were still the most urgent issue. As the plague worsened, the ones Tang Yuan had previously built were no longer enough. So I led the workers into the forest to chop wood and build more. I even participated in the medical work, joining the imperial physicians to discuss the spread and treatment of the disease. Tang Yuan's injuries were grave. He remained unconscious for several days, unable to eat anything. We had to use a horn funnel to force medicine down his throat. His ribs and shin bone were broken, but thanks to his martial training, he'd instinctively protected his organs. Had his spleen been injured, we wouldn't have been able to save him. Everything felt like a mountain pressing down on me. The cries of the suffering civilians were like whips lashing against my back, forcing me to carry that mountain forward, one step at a time. On the fourth day of his coma, the new medicine finally showed results. We had more people in the shelters than ever before, so we had to rush the construction work. Soon, the number of infected dropped significantly, and Tang Yuan finally woke up. I asked him, "Why were you so stupid?" "They were after me, not you." He looked at me, then lowered his gaze. His pale face flushed a strange shade of red. He said, "I couldn't let you face them. Ever since we were kids, you've always hidden behind me." As the new medicine was distributed in large quantities, the first recovered patients removed their face masks, stepped out of the shelters, and into the sun. They felt the wind, the warmth of freedom, and thanked the heavens for sparing them. Tang Yuan was finally able to get out of bed. There were no new infections in the city. Hundreds had recovered. The shelters began to come down, and the people were returning to their homes. We should have been able to return too, but Tang Yuan's condition made travel impossible. He needed at least a month more to rest. Bone injuries took 100 days to heal. So we decided to stay in Chongjo and recuperate properly. "What do you think?" I asked him, wanting to hear his thoughts. He gave a quiet and said, "I'll go along with whatever you decide." I'd heard Chongjo's gentleman's smile wine was famous, and wanted to try a whole jar myself. Tang Yuan smacked me on the head and took it away. "You've never even had wine before." I was about to say that's exactly why I wanted to try it, then remembered I hadn't had any but Chongjo had. He fussily poured me half a small bowl. I took a tiny sip. It burned going in but left a mellow sweetness behind. Gradual, smooth, not bad. Then I took a big gulp. It scorched from my lips all the way down to my chest. I coughed so hard I cried. So this was what alcohol tasted like. It felt awful. Why did people love drinking it so much? Why was it so expensive? Tang Yuan gently patted my back. "It's not meant for W. Not meant for you. No one starts out drinking the strong stuff." I wiped my tears and said, "Who says this is my first time?" The burning began to mellow into sweetness. I ignored his protests and snatched the jar, drinking to my heart's content. Then I stuck my head out the window and let the wind wash over me. It felt freeing. Not just today, from now on, whenever I want to drink, I will. No one can stop me. I squinted at the view in front of me. The sky beyond the window was wide, not a stifling, boxy little room. The lights flickered with life, not some dim little candle. There were people, noise, birdsong in the distance, wine in my hand. Everything was so close, so alive. I suddenly wanted to laugh. I tilted my head back, smacked my lips. No more taste of wine. I glanced into the bottom of the jar. Oh. I'd finished it. Didn't expect my first time drinking to be that wild. But the moon tonight looked strangely bright. It hadn't shone like that in the past few days. Maybe it was celebrating my rebirth, too. I shouted for another jar. Then a strange feeling bubbled up from my chest. I heard Tang Yuan whisper by my ear, "If you can't handle it, don't drink." "Who says I can't handle it? Let's settle this like real men." Shang Shirshu. I turned toward him. "You calling me?" And then I lost consciousness. Before I blacked out, I vaguely saw my reflection somewhere and heard someone whisper at my ear, "So, it really was you." Once we re-entered the city, Tang Yuan insisted on walking me home. From a distance, I saw Chongjo standing at the gate, waiting. After more than 3 months, I had fully adapted to this body. Even when I looked at the body that used to be mine, it no longer felt strange. Chongjo looked even thinner and more haggard than before. Dark circles weighed heavy beneath his eyes, and clothes that once fit snugly now hung loose on his frame. I let out a long sigh, wondering how I was going to explain this to my brother. The moment he saw Tang Yuan escorting me back, Chongjo tensed up and hurriedly pulled me inside. Tang Yuan didn't say much. He just told me to get some rest before leaving. I heard that Madame Shen's relative had gone into labor but didn't survive the delivery, leaving behind only a baby girl. She had been devastated for days. Only after I returned did she begin to regain her spirit. Madame Shen placed food into my bowl and gently stroked my arm, her eyes filled with concern. "Why have you lost so much weight? It must have been exhausting out there, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. I turned to look at Chongjo and found him looking at me, too. I said, "Let's call off the engagement." Something told me that if I didn't do it tonight, I'd never get another chance. Chongjo shot to his feet. "I don't agree." Madame Shen slammed the table. "What right do you have to disagree? If my son hadn't had to leave that day, you'd have been kicked out long ago. You're lucky we're even letting you speak." I placed the written separation agreement in front of him, along with the keepsake he had once given me. He bit his lip, voice barely holding back a sob. "Can't we not break it off?" I lifted his hand and placed a brush in it. "Let's end it," I said softly. "It's better for both of us." He refused to write, so I held his hand and guided it myself. A single teardrop landed on the paper. I wiped it away with my thumb and signed the last stroke, pressing his fingerprint to seal it. The weight on my chest lifted. Before leaving, I told him I'd wait until tomorrow to go. I wanted to pack up everything, leave nothing behind. The next morning when I awoke, I had returned to my own body. Touching my familiar, yet distant face, I realized heaven must have been playing a joke on me, like I'd just woken from a dream. Chongjo blocked the door, refusing to let me leave. My brother arrived and struck him to the ground with a single slap. Tang Yuan helped me gather my things and walk away. "Ah Su." I raised my finger to my lips. "Young Master Shen, please call me Miss Zhang." Chongjo's eyes were bloodshot. His hands, clenched tightly beneath his sleeves, were bleeding. But that had nothing to do with me anymore. When my parents saw me, they finally learned of the broken engagement. They sighed, but there was a look of relief on their faces. Everyone had seen that Chongjo never loved me. Only I had been foolish enough to believe he'd come to appreciate me someday. Now it seemed heaven really had given me a second chance. I tilted my head back. Drizzles of fine rain fell across my forehead. I wiped it away, then looked up again. A green oil paper umbrella blocked the wind and rain above me. I turned and smiled. "It's you." Tang Yuan extended his hand, brushing the water from the edge of the umbrella. "Good thing we got the flood under control in Chongjo. Looks like the rain's not stopping anytime soon." I gazed out. The misty rain blurred the world, peaceful and still. Suddenly, I had the urge to drink. I smacked my lips and said, "Come on. My treat." Chongjo still wouldn't give up and came to our door again. But without the engagement, my parents no longer treated him kindly. He and his gifts were both thrown out. I finished my last bite of snow fungus soup, threw on a cloak, and headed out. My brother was reading. When he saw me, he lifted his eyes slightly. "Where are you going?" "To Anchang Orphanage," I replied again, reassuring him. "Don't worry. Tang Yuan is with me. I'll be fine." He lowered his eyes and muttered, "Come back early." Anchang Orphanage took in orphans and the elderly. I had finally found something I wanted to do. To use what little I had to help as many people as I could. Tang Yuan stood in the misting rain, dressed in his signature green robe, holding an umbrella. I smiled. "Didn't expect this. You've actually got a decent face." He frowned. "What nonsense." I stuck out my tongue and climbed into the carriage. The rain outside was easing. Golden rays began peeking through the clouds. "The rain's letting up. Maybe you don't need to come with me." He closed the umbrella and stepped into the carriage. "If I don't go, your brother won't rest easy." Fair enough. The streets after the rain were peaceful and clean, as if all the filth had been washed away. "Ah Su." I opened my eyes. "What is it? What are your plans going forward?"
Plans.
I lifted the curtain and looked outside. The crowd surged, ebbing and flowing like tides. "I want to go everywhere and help as many people as I can." He looked at me, a seriousness in his gaze that couldn't be ignored. "Would you mind taking one more person with you?" I was speechless in surprise. He leaned closer, close enough for me to see my reflection in his eyes. Just like that night I got drunk in Chongjo. Give me a chance, he whispered. Tang Yuan's extra. I can't explain how I knew, but I recognized her immediately. Su had these little habits since we were kids. When frightened, she'd clutch her chest. Her eyes would dart around. She'd had sinus issues ever since a childhood fire. At first, I thought maybe she and Chongjo had spent so long together that they'd picked up each other's habits. But as time went on, I was certain he was Su. She hated the smell of Sichuan pepper. When she ate something she liked, her eyebrows would lift ever so slightly. She'd save the best bites for last. She knocked herself on the head when upset, picked at her fingers when anxious. And she always carried a faint, lingering scent. That was Su. I just didn't understand why she had become Chongjo. Maybe heaven gave her another chance, so she could finally see that Chongjo was never the right person. Su tried to avoid me, thinking she'd hidden it well. But I'd known all along. So the day the riot broke out again, I shoved her inside and faced the mob myself. She had always been the girl I protected from behind. How could I let her face that kind of danger alone? If it had been Chongjo in that moment, I might have shoved him forward myself. The day she officially ended things, I was the one who came to take her away. Finally, I could stand by her side openly and without shame. Chongjo still didn't want to let her go, so I struck him hard enough that he couldn't get back up. Su had changed a lot. Her gaze had become steady and full of quiet compassion, but there was always a misty veil behind her eyes. She wanted to go out into the world to help more people. She had her own ideas now. All I needed to do was support her from behind. Her brother grabbed me by the collar and demanded to know why I was indulging her nonsense. I shrugged. How is it nonsense? I think she's amazing. And then his fist landed squarely on my nose. We worked together to help refugees. In just a short time, everyone in the streets and alleys knew the name Shang Shirshu. Occasionally, a few local thugs would cause trouble, but I made sure to beat them until their teeth rattled. Of course, the one I most wanted to hit was that man. Even after the engagement was broken off, he wouldn't stop pestering her. That day, they finally had a falling out. Su was completely disgusted with him. I escorted her home. On the way back, I saw him still standing in the rain. I sneered and lowered the curtain. What's the point of pretending to be heartbroken now? Who's that performance for? Soon, Su's travels were back on the agenda. Her family couldn't dissuade her and repeatedly asked me to look after her. I knelt before her parents and solemnly knocked my head to the ground 3 times, swearing to the heavens, I will take good care of her. We traveled across deserts and mountains, rivers and seas. We witnessed suffering, and we saw prosperity. The journey was full of hardship, but we never thought about giving up. And that was enough. As long as she kept going, I would go with her. Chongjo's extra. When she said she wanted to break off the engagement, the shattered light in her eyes stung. I shook my head, unwilling to dwell on it. For 5 years, I gave her good food, a good life. I'd already gone above and beyond. Maybe it was heaven punishing me. Overnight, she and I switched bodies. So I had no choice but to postpone the separation. Once again, poor Lan Qing would have to put up with the wait. Mother looked at me with disgust in her eyes, the kind I'd never seen before. In her eyes, I wasn't even me anymore. Then she turned her attention to that body, the one that used to be mine, smiling as she served it food. I told myself, she's always hated Su. That's all. It's not about me. But I hadn't expected that Lan Qing would. I was stunned for a moment. I grabbed Su by the collar and demanded we switch back immediately. That kind of mother and that version of Lan Qing were too foreign and frightening. Frightening. Isn't that what I go through every single day? I was speechless. But Mother was such a kind, gentle person. She must have just been irritated by something. I nodded. Yes, that must be it. Mummian came in and said Miss Lan Qing had asked to see me. Even the way she said those words made her teeth grind. She called Lan Qing a shameless fox. I scolded her harshly and made her kneel in the courtyard for half a day. As expected, servant and mistress. Neither could stand competition. Lan Qing said she came to apologize. I was thrilled. I told myself, see? This wasn't my fault. She was still my Lan Qing, gentle and kind. Lan Qing asked to meet at the lakeside pavilion, said she brought me a gift. She opened a box of beautifully arranged pastries, said they were my favorites, made by her own hand. She reminisced about all the things we'd done. Boating together, walking the streets, drinking wine, sewing clothes, drawing her eyebrows, placing flowers in her hair. Then her tone turned sharp. Do you really think you deserve him? Before I could react, she grabbed the pastries from my hands and crushed them under her foot, her face twisted with rage. She lunged forward and shoved me against a wooden pillar. We started to struggle. Her strength was shocking. She nearly forced half my body over the edge of the pavilion. The water beneath sparkled, cold and deep. You spoiled noblewomen think that just because you were born with status, you deserve everything. You really thought I came here just to bring you pastries? She suddenly smirked, yanked me up, spun me around, so fast I couldn't react. In a blink, we switched positions. Then I heard my mother's deafening scream, snapping me out of it. She rushed over and dragged me out of the water, then stormed toward me, twisted my arm, and spat curses right into my face. Still in shock, I forgot to hold back and accidentally shoved her away. Mother! I quickly helped her up, only to see blood trickling down her forehead. She fainted from the fright. When she woke, she cried hysterically, threatened to report me, demanded an immediate separation. She kept crying until Ah Su returned. I knelt in the ancestral hall, listening to the noise from the front hall. Then silence. There were no cushions in the ancestral hall. Mother insisted they be removed, saying one must show true sincerity to the ancestors. Now my knees were in agony. For some reason, I suddenly felt like she was doing all of this just to hurt Ah Su. Ah Su told me she had already calmed Lan Qing down. Thankfully, the rescue had been timely. She had only swallowed a little water, nothing serious. She asked me, "Why did you push her?" I said I didn't, but I couldn't explain. I didn't understand why Lan Qing would do that. She used to be so gentle she wouldn't even step on an ant. Ah Su asked me, "How do you want to handle this?" I opened my mouth, and my own thoughts startled me. If it had been me kneeling here today, she said, you still would have taken her side, wouldn't you? I said nothing. I never intended to hurt her. What was the worst that could happen? Kneel a few more hours? I just wanted to ask Lan Qing why she did it. Ah Su left with Mother. As they walked away, I saw their shadows fade into the distance. I reached out trying to grasp them. I knelt in that hall all night. In the middle of the night, Ah Su sent someone with a cushion and an extra cloak. I wrapped myself tightly and curled up by the door. This body was so weak. After one night kneeling, I fell sick. And then the female monthly ordeal came. It was unbearable. I asked Mummy, was it always like this? Did I really go through this every month? For life? She said, it stops when you're pregnant. I was stunned. So if I got pregnant, no more pain, and I'd have a child? Sounded like a win-win. I imagined Ah Su holding a child, standing by the door waiting for me to return, and somehow the thought made me happy. Maybe it was time. Time for a child. I counted on my fingers. It had been 7 days since we switched bodies. Today we were scheduled to visit the Shang family, her family. Her brother had always known about the separation. It was supposed to be announced today, but we never said a word. So she was taken away by him. My father-in-law and mother-in-law held my face in their hands, examining me with tearful concern, saying I'd grown too thin and asking if life at the Shin residence had been too hard. If anything happens, talk it through with Yunzhou. You two are about to get married. You must get along well with Yunzhou. Only if you're happy, your father and I will be happy too. My mother-in-law held my hand as she spoke on and on. Her hands were warm, wrinkled and dry, and I couldn't bear to let go. My own mother had never said such things to me. All she ever talked about was how unfilial, rude, and improper Ah Soo was, urging me to call off the engagement and find someone better. I suddenly felt dazed. All these years, had she really been right? If so, what had I been doing all this time? Why hadn't I ended the engagement? The flooding in Chongjo had indeed spiraled out of control, but the burden now rested on Ah Soo's shoulders. And she wasn't going alone. Tang Yuan was going with her. For some reason, unease crept into my chest. Even if we had switched bodies, she was still the real Shang Shirshu. This journey to Chongjo, traveling side by side, working hand in hand, they'd grown up together, and Tang Yuan had always liked her. I said I wanted to go too. She asked if I was insane. The day she left, I stood at the gate to see her off. She accepted the osmanthus cakes I offered and walked away without looking back. Suddenly, I remembered. Not long ago, she had done the same for me, and I hadn't spared her a single glance. Mother didn't see her off either. She was too busy welcoming our cousin. The cousin was small and delicate, but her belly was so swollen from the baby inside that I didn't even dare stand close. I asked Mumian, "Is this what pregnancy looks like?" It's not how I imagined it. With our cousin's arrival, Mother's attention shifted entirely. For once, I had a bit of peace. I began writing letters to Ah Soo, but she didn't reply to a single one. One day, our cousin had a minor quarrel with Lan Qing. She got so angry that her belly began to tremble. It was terrifying. I forced Lan Qing to apologize. Lan Qing cried and said she'd tell on me to Ah Soo when she got back. Our cousin held my hand and said, "You've done so much for this family over the years, and cousin still went looking for another woman. He really doesn't know how lucky he is." I blushed bright red and laughed awkwardly. That night, Lan Qing came to find me. The moment she saw me, she slapped me twice across the face. She said that she was going to be the young madam of the Shin family. That Ah Soo and I weren't even married yet, and she had no right to stay at the Shin house, let alone order her around. "You have no idea what Yunzhou really thinks of you, do you?" she spat. "He says you're a fake, pretending to be virtuous, reserved, and boring. You could never please him. He says he regrets getting engaged to you. Just seeing your face makes him sick. Why haven't you died already?" I was so stunned I couldn't say a word. I'd never spoken about Ah Soo in front of her. When she asked, I always brushed it off lightly. She used to say that as long as I loved her, that was enough. The next day, Mother made me stand still for discipline. She wouldn't scold our cousin, and she refused to blame Lan Qing. So I became the outlet for all her frustration. Under the scorching sun, I stood for 2 hours. I watched them enjoy iced lychees and pastries in the shade of the pavilion. And I wondered, how had Ah Soo endured this for 5 years? Soon it was time for our cousin to give birth. She went into labor in the morning, but by midnight, there had still been no progress. Buckets of bloody water had been carried out, one after another. The entire courtyard reeked of blood. The air was thick with her shrieks of pain. My scalp felt like it was being peeled back, my head buzzing with tension. My stomach twisted, acid rising in my throat. I had only ever heard people talk about childbirth, but seeing it with my own eyes, I never imagined it would be this horrifying. Suddenly, our cousin's scream stopped. Then came frantic shouting for Mother and the midwife. They told me to go get a doctor, fast. I ran, stumbling from house to house. No one would come. Men and women weren't supposed to touch. The rules of propriety forbade it. In desperation, I nearly resorted to violence. Only then did I manage to drag one back. The baby was too large, and she'd lost too much strength. She couldn't push anymore. The doctor said they'd have to cut her open and pull the baby out. It was the first time I had ever seen a woman give birth. There was blood all over the bed and the floor. Her legs were spread and tied down. The midwife leaned on her stomach with all her might. Her face was as pale as death. Her hair hung over her cheeks, her lips torn and bleeding from being bitten so hard. The smell of blood was overpowering. I couldn't hold it in any longer and turned away to vomit. I wanted to flee, but Mother screamed at me to come help, to hold her down so she wouldn't thrash while the doctor cut. I froze in place. Cut her? Just cut her open like that? Wouldn't that kill her? Her agonizing screams filled the room, then the sickening sound of scissors cutting flesh. Blood gushed beneath the bed. Finally a wail. The baby's cry. Our cousin had passed out. The doctor checked her and shook his head. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. My ears buzzed. I couldn't hear anything. Couldn't see clearly either. Mother sobbed uncontrollably until she finally collapsed too. A faint voice came from the bed. Our cousin reached toward me. I crawled over and grabbed her hand. Blood stained her pale face, making her look even more ghostly. She exhaled weakly, holding my hand tightly. Cousin, did you see the baby? I nodded gently.
Yes.
It's a girl. A girl? She turned to look out the window. The light cast across her face. How could it be a girl? If I'm not there, who'll take care of her? She suddenly tightened her grip, her voice trembling. Cousin, promise me. Take care of her, please. Ever since my parents died after the separation, I've had no one. Only Aunt took me in. You're a good person. Cousin just didn't appreciate you. But for the child, please help me. She clutched my hand so tightly, I thought she might crush my bones. I nodded. I will. She smiled as if a great weight had lifted. Then her grip loosened. The light in her eyes faded. Suddenly, thunder cracked across the sky. Wind howled through the windows, making them wail, as if the heavens, too, were weeping at this injustice. I touched my own face, not realizing when the tears had started to fall.
Cold and wet.
After her death, Mother became even more irritable. Her fury lashed out on me for no reason. I could only grit my teeth and endure it. The baby was named Lele, for joy and health. Mother found 2 wet nurses, who took turns caring for her. Lele was a quiet baby, ate, slept, and hardly cried. She even had dimples. When she smiled, she looked just like her mother. Mother turned away and quietly wiped her tears, murmuring again and again how sorry she was to my cousin, that she hadn't managed to protect the only child she left behind. I gently pinched Lele's cheek, soft and tender. When she grows up, she'll surely be a beautiful young lady. With Lele around, my stagnant life suddenly found new meaning. Though she was just over a month old, she was full of energy, kicking so hard I could barely hold onto her, staying up crying all night, eating and drinking with gusto. Her eyes sparkled like stars, filling everyone who looked at her with joy. I, too, was run ragged, exhausted, sleep-deprived, face pale, visibly thinner by the day. Sometimes, Lan Qing would ask to see the baby. I'd hold Lele and keep my distance. I had come to see her clearly, so much for her gentle and sweet act. It was all fake, just a performance in front of me. Sue was the one who was truly good. When she came back, I would treat her well. I would make up for everything I had missed, everything I had lost. Time passed quickly. Sue returned. Before dawn, I was already waiting by the gate. I wanted to be the first person she saw. But the carriage was not from the Shun household. It was from the Tang family. Sue stepped down with Tang Yuan at her side. As a man myself, I recognized that look in his eyes too well. It made me nervous, unsteady. That night, Sue brought up the engagement. She wouldn't even look at me twice. She wrote the dissolution herself and told me to press my fingerprint. I refused. So she took my hand and wrote it out, stroke by stroke. Once upon a time, I had held her hand like this too, to teach her how to write, how to draw. The next morning, we returned to our original bodies. I ran to find her, wanting to tell her I was wrong. She was gone. She took only her own belongings. Everything I'd once given her, she left behind. I ordered that Lan Qing be sent back to her own home. She cried, asking if I'd fallen for someone else. How could you change in just a few months? She wept. I looked up at the sky. Fine rain fell across my face. I had known Asu for years, and yet it couldn't compare to the moment I broke her heart. That was my mistake. I had wanted to make it right, but it was too late. Today marked my 10th attempt to visit. My father-in-law threw me out, along with all my gifts. He said if I dared show up again, he'd break my legs. So I went to find Asu. But every time I saw her, Tang Yuan was there. He wouldn't let me near her. One punch nearly had me throwing at my guts. Asu kept her distance, tossed me a glance like a feather in the wind. No matter how loudly I called her name, she never looked back. At home, I drank for days. Mother beat her fists against my chest, crying and wailing, calling me unfilial, blaming me for not producing a child, for leaving the household in disarray and dragging her to exhaustion. I laughed bitterly. Isn't this what you always wanted? Now that Asu's gone, you're in charge of the house from now on. She looked at me, stunned, too shocked to even cry. I couldn't be bothered. I stumbled outside. I was going to find Asu. I had to bring her back. The streets were lively. People said the Shang family had opened their granaries to feed refugees. A living bodhisattva among men. The young lady of the Shang family is not only beautiful but kind-hearted. Whoever marries her is blessed for 3 lifetimes. That's right. Did you see that gentleman beside her? They're a perfect match, made for each other. I heard her ex brought another woman home, so they broke up. Talk about blind. I followed the crowd. From a distance, I saw her. She wore plain clothes, lightly made up. Yet among the crowd, she shone like a star. When she had been by my side, I hadn't noticed her light. But now that she was gone, I saw her instantly. Tang Yuan stood beside her. The townsfolk teased them. She didn't deny anything, just smiled quietly. But her ears flushed pink. I waited at a distance for them to finish. When Asu saw me, the smile on her face vanished. She packed up and turned to leave. Asu. I stepped in front of her. Don't go yet. Let me say one thing. Just one. Tang Yuan looked at her, then stepped back to her side. What is it? She asked coldly, her tone distant and sharp. The ache in my chest was unbearable. She had never spoken to me like this before. She had always been gentle, caring. I asked carefully, have you been doing well lately? Very well, she replied. Not a word more. I forced a smile. That's good. I'm glad to hear it. She frowned slightly, about to walk away. I quickly stopped her. Sue. I just wanted to ask, would you be free tomorrow? There's still much to take care of at the estate, and you left so suddenly we didn't get to sort things. That's your family's business. I'm just an outsider. It's not my place to get involved. You're not an outsider, I said urgently. To me, you never have been. Her expression turned ice cold. Young Master Shin, some things are better left unsaid. I am now the eldest daughter of the Shang family. I have nothing to do with you. If I'm not an outsider, what am I? Let me say this one last time. Don't come looking for me again. If you do, I'll report you to the authorities for harassing a respectable woman. I don't know how long they had been gone. By the time I noticed, the rain had started. I stood where I was, staring in the direction they left, soaked in the rain the entire night. When I woke up, 7 days had passed. Mother's eyes were swollen from crying. She hadn't left my bedside for a full week. The next time I heard about them, they were already gone. They said they were going to travel the world, to witness its sorrows and help those in need.
Sue had left.
The once bustling estate now felt hollow, and I couldn't help but laugh. Shen Yunzhou. Oh, Shen Yunzhou. You have no one to blame but yourself. Look at you now. Who are you trying to impress? You deserve a life of loneliness. You deserve to never be loved. You deserve it all. The end.